Monday, December 4th, page 289, page 175 on the PDF. Let's go. Mom and I had to leave a half hour earlier today in order to be at Tangerine Middle School by 7:30. I packed my books and my lunch like I was going for a normal day. What did I know? Mom drove tensely, silently, angrily. I can't say that I blame her. In just 1 week, both of her sons have gone from success to failure, from public praise to public shame. I tried to picture Mom in our climate-controlled storage place, finding that gym bag, not recognizing it, wondering whose it was, deciding to open it to find out, staring at the items inside, pulling them out one by one, the awful truth appearing to her gradually, like a slowly developing Polaroid. We pulled up in front of Tangerine Middle at 7:25. Absolutely nothing was happening. None of the karate kickers were on the sidewalk. None of the gangsters were hanging out. None of the buses were pulling into the loop. I'd never been there so early before. We walked through the front doors and climbed the stairs to the main office. Dr. Johnson was just inside the glass doors, talking to two other adults, Tomas Cruz and a woman who I recognized from the soccer games. She looked a little like Victor, so I guess she must be Mrs. Guzman. Dr. Johnson shook hands with my mother very seriously. She looked at me and said, "Paul, why don't you wait out in the hallway for a few minutes? We'll call you." Dr. Johnson led the adults to her inner office. I drifted back through the glass doors into the hall. I heard light footsteps on the stairs, so I started watching the second floor landing. A familiar brown ponytail appeared, then a familiar face. I said, "Teresa, hi." She didn't really look at me. She came to the top of the stairs and said, "So there you are." I said, "Did they call you in too?" "No, not me, just Tino and Victor. They're inside." "They are? I didn't see them." "Yeah, they're in there. Dr. Johnson probably put them in the nurse's room. That's where they usually wait." "Oh, why are you here?" "Me? I'm always here early. For my job." "Office aide?" "Yeah, right. That's me." Teresa and I stood together with our backs to the glass wall of the office. We stood for a whole minute like that in silence, like two strangers waiting for a bus. Then I remembered, and I reached into my backpack. I pulled out the science report, laser printed in 4 colors, with a clear plastic binder. I handed it to Teresa. "Here, I was hoping I would run into you. I finished putting together the report. I hope you like it." Teresa took it and studied the title, printed in tall orange letters with black shading. She read it out loud. "The Golden Dawn Tangerine." She leafed through the report, looking at the pie chart for the varieties of citrus grown in Tangerine County and the bar graph for the decline of citrus acreage in Tangerine County. She whispered, "This is beautiful. This is A+ for sure." Teresa looked me in the eye and smiled, but not for long. Suddenly, like they had sprung a leak, her eyes filled up with big tears that rolled down her cheeks. She shook her head from side to side and demanded to know, "Why did you do this?" "What? Do what?" "All of it." She held up the report. "All of this. All of it. Why did you come to my school and come to my house to work and jump on some coach? Are you crazy? You mess up your whole life. Do you know that?" I'd never seen Teresa angry or upset. Now she was both. I tried to calm her down, but she went on, "Listen, you're not one of these guys. Do you understand that? You're not one of these guys who are sitting in the office all the time, waiting to get punished. You don't even belong here. You don't live in Tangerine. You live in Lake Windsor Downs. And you're going to have to keep on living there. You're going to have to face that high school. You're going to have to face that coach and everybody else who was in that gym. Tino and Victor don't have to do any of that. Tino and Victor are going to walk away from all of this." She looked away, shaking her head at my absolute stupidity. She took several deep breaths, then she looked back at me and repeated calmly, "So why did you do it? Why did you jump on that coach?" I raised up my shoulders and let them fall. I've thought about that a lot over the last 3 days. I spent a lot of time thinking about stuff, probably too much. But that night in the gym, I didn't think at all. I just did it. Teresa wiped her cheek on her sleeve. "Yeah? Well, you really messed up. Tino and Victor got caught anyway. They always do." We fell silent again and settled back into our positions against the wall. I tried to lighten the mood. I said, "Maybe this is all your fault. You're the first one I met here. You're the one who took me around." She didn't know if I was kidding or not. She said, "So how's that make it my fault? You introduced me to Tino and Victor." "Yeah, well, you said you wanted to play soccer." But you didn't have to do that. You could have let me sink or swim on my own. Now she smiled slightly. Yeah, I could have let you sink. She pointed to the office. Dr. Johnson told us some kids were coming here from Lake Windsor because their school fell down a sinkhole. I don't know, I guess I figured you'd all be looking down your noses at us. But some of those kids were, but not you. Oh, and some of those kids were, but not you. You acted like you were happy to be here. You liked it here. And then you said you wanted to play on the soccer team. I don't know. I guess I felt sorry for you, especially when I thought about what Victor and those guys might do to you. The door to Dr. Johnson's office opened. Teresa and I both looked in that direction. She said, whenever Luis talked about you, he called you Paul. I'm going to start calling you that too. She took me by the arm. Come on, Paul. She led me into the office. Dr. Johnson walked out and said, Teresa, would you go ask Miss Pollard to come up here and to bring Paul Fisher's file with her? Teresa gave me a silent squeeze on the arm and took off to do the errand. I peered into the inner office. I could see Mom's profile. She was crying. Dr. Johnson said, okay, Paul, come with me. You can wait in the nurse's room. We'll be calling you boys in one at a time. She led me down the short hall and opened the door to the nurse's room. Tino and Victor were in there, sitting in black chairs against the white wall. They seemed smaller, younger than I remembered, like little kids. They certainly weren't nervous. I guess they'd been in here too many times. Tino continued to stare straight ahead, but Victor popped up in his seat and started in on Dr. Johnson. Oh no, Dr. Johnson, you're bringing the wrong boy in here now. Fisherman was just sitting up there with his mama and papa. He just fell out of those bleachers like he fainted or something. He's lucky he landed on that dude. That broke his fall. He turned to Tino for support. Fisherman fainted out there in the grove last week, am I right? Tino ignored him. Dr. Johnson, he might have a brain tumor making him faint like that. That boy needs an x-ray. Dr. Johnson shook her head and said quietly, things are bad enough, Victor. Don't make them worse. Now come along with me. Victor opened his eyes wide and looked at me. Then he got up and followed Dr. Johnson out of the room. I sat down in his chair next to Tino. He surprised me by speaking right away. When you get in there, don't be running your mouth like that fool Victor. All you say to Dr. Johnson is, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, and thank you, ma'am. You understand? You take your 3-week suspension and you go home. I said, 3 weeks. You figured that's what it'll be? Yeah. Tino shifted around in his chair, but he still wasn't looking at me. He went on, and you can tell Tuna for me that we weren't disrespecting his brother or anything like that. We just had to take care of business. I think he knows that. Yeah, well, you tell him I said so. Okay. Suddenly, Dr. Johnson opened the door and signaled that it was Tino's turn to follow her. I was left in the nurse's room by myself, staring at that eye chart. It seemed like it was about 2 minutes later when she came back for me. I followed her into the inner office. Mom was sitting in the same spot. Her eyes were red, but she was no longer crying. Dr. Johnson stood behind her desk, held up a thin white booklet called The Student Code, and said, I've already explained this to your mother, Paul. The school board has set down its policies in this booklet, and we are all obliged to follow them. It is my duty to explain to you what violation you committed and what penalty you will receive. She held the booklet out in case I wanted to read it. She explained, your violation is called a level 4 infraction. In this case, assaulting a teacher or other school board employee. This is the most serious level of infraction. The penalty for this and for any other level 4 infraction is expulsion. Dr. Johnson paused to make sure I understood. I don't think I did. I was thinking to myself, 3 weeks. I'm supposed to get 3 weeks. She continued, as of today, you are expelled from all Tangerine County public schools for the remainder of the academic year. She paused again and looked at me. I heard myself say, yes, ma'am. Dr. Johnson set down the student code booklet and asked, do you have any questions about this? I thought, no, ma'am, and thank you, ma'am, but I couldn't say them. I was too confused, and I did have questions. I said, what about Victor and Tino? Are they expelled too? Dr. Johnson frowned. I could tell that she didn't want to talk about them. She pointed back at the student code and said, no, Paul, their violation falls under the level 3 infractions, fighting with another student. The penalty for that is 3 weeks suspension. I nodded. What else could I say but thank you, ma'am? Dr. Johnson moved toward the door, so Mom got to her feet. Dr. Johnson said, "Your mother has decided to waive your right to appeal. Basically, Paul, you did it, you got caught, and you got punished. On the positive side, you've already completed enough days to get credit for this semester. There are options available to you. Your mother has selected the option of enrolling you in a private school to complete the second half of seventh grade." We were all moving out the door by now and into the main office. Other kids were coming in and out. Dr. Johnson held out her hand, and I shook it. She said, "I wish you well in that option, Paul. Goodbye, Mrs. Fisher." And she was gone. Just like that. I guess I had expected more. I guess I had expected a pep talk or a stern speech, but she got rid of me as quickly as she'd gotten rid of Victor and Tino. The office was starting to fill up with kids, and Dr. Johnson was needed elsewhere. The day had begun. The students at Tangerine Middle School were doing what they always did, but I was not among them. I was no longer one of them. That realization hit me suddenly like a smack in the face. I followed Mom down the 2 flights of stairs, keeping my head lowered so that I wouldn't have to look at anybody. When we got to the front door, I could hear the sounds of the mob of kids outside. The karate kickers had arrived, so had the gangstas. They were all doing what they did every morning, being wild, being loud, until they saw me. Then, in a heartbeat, it all stopped. They all stopped what they were doing to stare at me. Mom and I stood at the top step and stared back at them. She said, "Paul, what do they want?" I could hear mumbling from different areas in the crowd. They were saying stuff like, "That's him," and "That's Fisher." One of the biggest and baddest 8th grade gangsters moved toward us with his boys right behind him. Mom let out a frightening noise and whispered, "What are they doing?" I turned toward her and said out of the corner of my mouth, "No fear, Mom. Show them no fear." I walked slowly down the steps. Mom stayed where she was. The mob parted slightly, just enough to swallow me up. That big 8th grader held his fist out, and I put mine down on top of it. He said, "All right, Fisher." Suddenly, they were all on top of me. All these guys I didn't really know, guys who didn't really know me. They started pounding me on the back, rubbing my hair, shaking both of my hands at once. They were all saying stuff like, "Way to be, Fisher," and "Hang tough. Keep your head up, man." It was a strange moment for me among these big, bad strangers. Their words surrounded me and picked me up and moved me along toward the car. I could hear Mom yelling over the top of them, "Paul, are you all right in there?" Mom had worked her way around to the driver's side door and was fumbling with the keys. I opened my door and turned back to the mob. I couldn't think of a thing to say, so I just stuck my thumb up in the air awkwardly and slipped into my seat. They all turned and headed back to their usual places. Mom quickly locked the doors and we peeled out. But by now she was more puzzled than scared. She waited until we were safely away to ask, "What was that? What was that all about?" I curled up my lip. "They know a bad dude when they see one." "Paul, you're not a bad dude." "Oh, no?" I jerked my thumb back toward the mob. "Do you see any of those wusses getting expelled from every public school in Tangerine County?" Mom breathed a loud sigh. "You'd think those would be the worst words a mother could hear." She shook her head back and forth. I didn't know if she was going to laugh or cry. She laughed. "Not in this family." We drove through downtown Tangerine. Mom said, "Well, I'll tell you. I, for one, am glad you're out of that place." She wasn't glad for very long, I informed her. "I'm going back, Mom, next year. I already talked to the coach about it, and I'm going to make the all-county team." Mom said with certainty, "You can't do that," and then with less certainty, "I don't think you can do that." I quoted Gino's words. "They make exceptions for lots of guys. They're going to make one for me." "Well, I'll have to see about that." "There's nothing to see about. I've made up my mind." Mom shook her head some more, but she didn't seem to be upset. She certainly wasn't crying. Maybe she'd gone over the edge. Maybe we both had. For whatever reason, a strange feeling of calm had come over us. We reached Route 89 and turned south. I said, "What? Wrong way, Mom." "Depends on where you're going." "Where are we going?" "The mall. We're going to buy you some clothes that fit." "Okay. And some uniforms." "Some what?" "Blue pants, white shirts, blue ties." "You're kidding." "Nope. This is your option." "You're sending me to St. Anthony's?" "That's right. Dr. Johnson called the principal for me. Sister Mary Margaret. She agreed that you could start there on Wednesday in the 7th grade." on a trial basis. A trial basis? You mean she wants to find out if I'm too bad a dude to keep there? Yes, I guess that's what she means. You mean that I'll be walking in there with a bad reputation, that kids will fear me? Well, I would. Oh, I wouldn't go that far. Well, I would. I know all about fear. I thought about other new schools that I had entered. Do you realize, Mom, that I've never been anything but a nerd? And now I'm going to enter this nerd school, not as a fellow nerd, but as a feared and notorious outlaw? It's not a nerd school. Oh, yes, it is. I've been there. October 12th. Some of them may remember me from that day. I rode up there with the War Eagles. We laid them to waste 10-0. There was fear in their eyes, and there will be again when I walk in on Wednesday. Paul, please. You need to take this option very seriously. Not everybody gets a second chance. I thought, yeah, tell me about it, Mom. We pulled into the mall. Then we went on an enormous shopping spree, unprecedented in my lifetime. Mom was out of control. She let me buy everything that I even thought about wanting. She never said no. She never even hesitated. Bag after bag, store after store, sneakers, jeans, jackets, shirts, socks, underwear. When we got home, I went upstairs with a pair of lawn-sized garbage bags. I dumped out the clothes from my dresser. Then I pulled out the old clothes from my closet. I filled both bags and went back for 2 more. I put everything into those big green bags and then piled them in the garage for the Goodwill pickup. Then I started to work on my new stuff, pulling out pins, cutting off tags, throwing away paper, drawer after drawer, hanger after hanger. I filled up my dresser and my closet with new clothes that fit. Tuesday, December 5th. Dad had to take Eric down to the police station this morning to talk to Sergeant Rojas. They were there from 7:30 until 10:30. When they got back, Eric went straight up to his room. Dad came into the kitchen and told Mom and me. Arthur Bauer is trying to blame Eric. He's saying that Eric put him up to it. Eric denies it. He says Arthur misunderstood him. It's a big mess. He poured himself a cup of coffee and added, "The police will sort it out. It's their job, not mine." I said, "What do the witnesses say?" "I know that Antoine Thomas and Brian Baylor have given statements to the sergeant. They both say it was Arthur who actually assaulted the guy. The guy's name was Luis." Dad nodded and corrected himself. "I'm sorry, Luis." "I thought about Eric's group of flunkies," I asked. "What about friendly witnesses?" "Eric and Arthur don't have any friends, not since we started rounding up all that stolen jewelry. Nope, nobody but Arthur Bauer Sr. is saying it was a fair fight." Nobody but Arthur Bauer Sr. is saying it was a fair fight. Mom had her elbows flat on the tabletop, both hands up to her chin, like she was holding her own severed head. She asked, "So what's going to happen now?" Dad answered calmly, almost casually, as if it didn't have anything to do with him. "Now the wheels of justice will turn. Slowly but surely, each of them will have to answer for whatever it was he did. I'm not interfering anymore." I looked back at Mom. She at least seemed worried about her firstborn son. Dad, on the other hand, seemed more like those friends who had abandoned Eric, who now he regretted ever getting involved with him in the first place. He turned to me. "Paul, Sergeant Rojas wants a statement from you two. He wants you to type up a paragraph or 2 describing exactly what you saw and what you heard. You know, what really happened. You can give it to me, and I'll drop it off at the sheriff's department." I said, "Okay, I can do that." The phone rang in the great room. I walked over to the coffee table and picked it up. I heard a familiar voice. "You got to get yourself a better lawyer, homeboy." "Tino?" "Yeah, I guess you're right." "So, what's up? What are you going to be doing with yourself?" "I'm starting up at St. Anthony's on Wednesday." Tino snorted with contempt. "St. Anthony's, those losers? You gotta be kidding me." "Hey, I didn't say I was going to play for them. I'm playing for the War Eagles next year." "Oh, yeah? You don't think you're going to start, do you?" "Oh, I know I'm going to start. I'm going to start." "Yeah, well, we'll see about that." "What about you?" I asked him. "What are you going to be doing?" "Oh, I got lots to do. You know, it's what they call a blessing in disguise. Luis has been advertising the Golden Dawns in all the trade papers. There's big response, just like he said there would be. He's got orders from growers all over Florida, from Texas, from California, even from down in Mexico. I got to help our daddy get all those orders filled. I got to help him with a lot of the other stuff that Luis did too." Tino paused, and he said awkwardly, "Hey, fisherman, Anytime you want to come out and work in the groves, you come on out. You're on the crew. You know what I'm saying? I knew what he was saying. I answered, yeah, thanks. I want to. That's something I really want to do. You just tell me when. You know when. Time and temperature, right? When the sun's going down, the wind's coming up, and the temperature's 39, 38, 37, you know what's going to happen next. And you know where we'll be. I'll be there too. All right. Maybe I'll even stay awake this time. Tino snorted again. There was a pause, and he said, hey, good luck at that St. Anthony's place. I don't know anything about it except that we beat their butts every year. And they got to wear uniforms. Is that right? Yeah, and they got nuns teaching there. No way, nuns? Yeah. All right. Well, you don't go getting wild like you do. I don't want to hear about you jumping out of the bleachers on a pope or anything like that. No, you won't. You take care of yourself, brother, and I'll see you in the groves. Yeah, bye. I hung up, but I heard that word brother echoing long afterward. I looked up at the ceiling, and I heard Eric pacing back and forth, in the cage that he had made for himself. Tuesday, December 5th later. I'm like 40% uploaded. Here we go. I came upstairs after dinner to write out my account of the crime for Sergeant Rojas. I logged in, went back through all my journal entries from Houston until today. Then I started writing. I didn't finish until after 9 p.m. I started with the basic facts, a paragraph or two, but I couldn't stop there. I had too much to say. I started writing about Luis and what he meant to the people around him and how they depended on him and why they looked up to him. Then I tried to write the same thing about Eric. What did he mean to the people around him? How did they depend on him? Why did they look up to him? I don't suppose the police are interested in all that. That's not their job, but it's part of the truth, a big part. And as Antoine Thomas told me, the truth shall set you free. I went downstairs, handed the disc to Mom and Dad, and said, here's the whole truth. Here's what really happened. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of orange juice. When I walked back through the great room, Mom and Dad had both pulled up chairs in the alcove. They were both staring hard at the computer screen. Wednesday, December 6th. The first day of school, take 3. I got into my blue pants, white shirt, blue tie, black socks, and black shoes and went down to the kitchen. Neither Mom nor Dad mentioned my disc over breakfast, but I was surprised to hear Mom say, Paul, we've talked about it, and we've decided that your father will drive you to St. Anthony's today. At 7:30, Dad and I walked out into the cold Florida morning. A light wind was blowing to the west, carrying the muck fire away from us, toward the Gulf. To the east, the sun was rising behind a long row of gray clouds. I stopped to look at them, jagged and red-peaked, looming there like a distant mountain range. We pulled out of the development and headed north, past the gates and guardhouses, past the high-tension wires and the osprey nests, toward Lake Windsor campus. When we stopped at the light at Route 89 in Seagull Way, Dad pointed over to the right. He said, "Do you see that? That's Mike Costello's tree." I looked where Dad was pointing and saw it. The big laurel oak. It had been planted on the front lawn of the high school, between the road and the bus lanes. It looked healthy enough, strong enough, but it was bound in a crisscross of wires attached to white metal stakes. Dad added, "Those stakes are just temporary until it can stand on its own." We drove on to the next light and turned right. We headed east toward the glowing colors of the mountain range and toward the glowing colors of the citrus groves. I thought to myself, Mike Costello has his tree, and that's good, but Luis has his tree too, and he will have many, many more. Soon the road narrowed to 2 lanes, and we were surrounded by the groves, surrounded by the beauty of it all. I stared through the window at the endless rows of trees, orange, tangerine, lemon, flying past us on either side. I rolled down the window and let it all in. The air was clear and cold, and the car immediately filled up with that scent, the scent of a golden dawn. Okay, there you are. Essay question project. Yo.